This is my fourth novel, Mississippi Blue 42. And it's funny because this is the book I started writing right after I wrote my debut, Don't Know Tough. It's a book that I rewrote 9 different times, and it didn't ever have. So it features a fictional federal investigation into the big money world of college football. And I very first started writing it when I came across an article called Meet the Bagman in SB Nation back in like 2014. And it was about this shady, kind of shadowy system that was being used to pay college athletes, big time college football players, especially like in the SEC country. And I just thought, damn, this is like perfect for a crime novel, and something different than what I had done. It felt like it could be more satirical, more Cohen brothers kind of dark humor, Elmore Leonard, kind of, or Carl Hyacin, who have got a ton of stuff, back there. These were people that when I really finally started cutting my teeth into crime, I thought, ooh, I would love to do something. So this one is a shift, a lane shift for me. And it took me those 9 iterations to, kind of make it out of my gritty, grit lit Southern noir, like comfort zone and into like a bigger world of FBI and college football. And so, yeah, Ray Johnson, she is our lead. She's a rookie FBI agent. She's a former collegiate pole vaulter whose father is a big time college football coach. And she's graduated top of her class from Quantico. She's got her heart set on Joint Terrorism Task Force, and she gets stuck on this white collar crime section where she's going to be investigating possible fraud at the University of Central Mississippi. Ray, one thing I love about Ray is she carries a retro trapper keeper around, and she's got it all formatted like her father's old scouting reports. It was when she was a kid, she actually would have she would scout teams with her dad. So she learned how to notice strengths, weaknesses, tendencies, all these things that a coach notices. So she essentially sees every case and every suspect like a coach. She's looking for tails, she's looking for tendencies. But again, she didn't get into the FBI to investigate football. And so it's this really kind of heavy, well, if I expose all this stuff that I'm starting to find out, and her dad always claimed that he ran his program the right way. He did things clean. There was nothing. And so the deeper she goes, the more she's torn, to figuring out, oh man. And her inspiration is threefold. So you remember the movie, Remember the Titans? Hayden Panettiere's character, she's the coach's daughter in the show. She's like 9 or something. And she's like all about football. And I always loved her as a character. And I always thought, like, what does that girl grow up and do? Like, there's not a world right now where she can be a college football coach. So what does she do with that expertise? So that was one part of it. Another part is my aunt's an FBI agent, a retired FBI agent. And then my wife is a college pole vaulter. So you mix all those 3 things together and you get Raider Indigo Johnson, who's the lead of Mississippi Blue 42. This cover was done by a guy named Jeff Wong, who Jeff Wong was an illustrator for Sports Illustrated for decades, especially back in the 90s. Like, remember the big bobbleheads of like Michael Jordan and Bill Clinton playing the sacks, like, or the big, like caricatures. That's what Jeff Wong did. And we got him to do this cover. So what ends up happening is, on her very, very early in her investigation, she is, she's claiming that this is not like, she doesn't know about all this dirty money. This is not like how her father did it. She's, there's really no evidence that they can find of fraud. And she's with her partner and they're driving through downtown Compson, Mississippi, a fictional college football town. And this quarterback falls off a college bar's roof. And when he hits the ground, money just poofs out of him, like out of this red gym bag. And so now it's so visible, it's so out there, that there is an investigation and there is real, and she's forced to look at this game that really raised her through a whole new perspective and look at her father and what he's all done to get to where he is too. And he plays out of the picture a lot. He's you ever read any of those like the Karen Cisco novels with Elmore Leonard? So like, like Out of Sight, she was a deputy marshal, like a U.S. marshal, but she had a dad that was like a cop. And I love those. Some of my favorite parts of those books or the movie, Out of Sight with J-Lo and George Clooney, is when she's talking to her dad. And so in the same way, Ray is she can't tell him about this case, but in a roundabout way, she's asking for different advice. And her chapter keeper is also filled with all these old coaching mantras, which as a former quarterback and a former coach, I loved like pulling out like all my old favorite, like everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So, Ray is a very idealistic character who's got a whole chapter keeper full of coaching mantras. And so that's where her dad, really, really plays into it. It's a bigger book than any of my other books. I think it's why it took so long to get there. It's longer. It's about 90 something thousand words when most of my others are much shorter and punchier. But yes, because I had to show this whole strange ecosystem of college football, which includes like bagmen, like Eddie Pride Jr., who's a former lineman who is he'll do anything, for the UCM Chiefs, but that loyalty is about to get put to the test, including his daughter, who's a gridiron girl. And a gridiron girl, is who hosts the high school or transfer recruits on their recruiting visits. And she also, Eddie has to, end up asking a lot of her in this book. So you get kind of this nice foil to Ray and her dad. Then, like you mentioned, Harry Christmas, Congressman Harry Christmas. If Colonel Sanders ate the current reptile of the Senate, Tommy Tuberville, then that would probably be Harry Christmas in this book. I mean, he's our puppet master who's been using a lot of his political sway to build this entire town around college football. Frank Ranchino is a Brooklyn-born federal agent who is on his way out, and he is Ray's old dog partner who just wants to get in, get out, and, does not want to dig into any of this. And then as soon as that quarterback hits the pavement, he's in over his head and Ray's running, fast. So Moses is the quarterback who is now thrust into this dangerous game when the other quarterback, takes the fall. And Moses was a ton of fun. So I was born in Eastern Arkansas, just outside of Memphis. And like geographically and culturally, that Delta region of Arkansas has way more in common with Mississippi than it does with where I live and where I grew up now, which is right in the foothills of the Ozarks. And so I've always had a real keen interest in that area and just the Delta in general. And so Moses was fun because he's from Clarksdale, Mississippi, and he's a Black quarterback. And there's all these sorts of, stereotypes. You could hear it. You turn on a college football game tomorrow or Saturday, and you're going to hear people talk about, you're going to hear those analysts talk about Black quarterbacks in a different way than they talk about white quarterbacks, and vice versa. You're going to hear them talk about a white receiver different than you're going to hear them talk about a Black receiver. And I always thought that was really interesting to get to kind of twist and turn, especially now that Moses has kind of gotten into this position through this strange set of circumstances.